stress off of our low back while also prioritizing the glutes and muscle groups that cross the hip. So Coach Turner is going to take a strong step, keeping the weight through his front heel with a strong vertical shin position, a slight hinge, arms straight down from the sides. You'll also notice that a big focus is knee tracking. We never want the knee to collapse in. So what we typically prefer is to toe in slightly. We like to use the analogy of crossing skis to be able to force the knee to stay out in a very strong stacked joint position.
So our third exercise in the lunge progression on day 1 is a dumbbell deficit reverse lunge. Now, reverse lunges are normally a little bit easier than a walking lunge, but we've stacked up 2 bumper plates to use as a deficit to make this substantially harder. We're going to be able to go through a much longer range of motion, and if you watch Coach Bryce's lead leg when he does go through this motion, you'll see that those joint angles are very similar to guard, albeit his body is at a slightly different orientation. So, first I want to address the 2 most common mistakes I see with deficit exercises. First off, if we're raising up that front leg, we need to use that new space that we've gone out of our way to set up. So when Coach Bryce steps back into a reverse lunge, we really want to make sure that his knee goes lower than these boxes or bumper plates. Otherwise, there was no point in putting them there in the first place. So take advantage of that deficit. That's how we can get to these very sharp joint angles in the low body, which is exactly what we're looking for here. The other mistake, go ahead and stand back up, is that we sometimes will put too much weight on the back leg, right, if we're distributing our weight back. So a way that I like to really troubleshoot that proactively is before Bryce steps back on his first rep, I like him to sort of flamingo for a second and get used to distributing his weight on that lead leg as he then hinges from the hip and then reaches back with that leg. And the dumbbells actually indicate his weight distribution very well. If they're hanging down from his shoulders, we should see those dumbbells pretty close to that front leg. If we see those dumbbells really drifting back, that's an indication that his weight is too far back and there's no weight on that lead leg. So really be sure to emphasize the weight on that leg. Keep those dumbbells close to the front leg.
The first exercise in our day 1 anterior core progression is the hanging hollow body hold. Now, all of the exercises in this movement pattern are listed in terms of time duration. And they're listed typically programmed for 30 seconds at a time. If you can't perform this exercise for 30 seconds, that's okay. Do your best and look to work up to that duration. If 30 seconds is too easy for you, you can go longer or skip ahead and move to the next exercise. Now, the hollow body hold position, many people assume you're just standing there or you're just hanging there. But there is an active component in that we want to be pulling our ribs and our hips together. The function of the rectus abdominis, the six-pack muscle that everyone's obsessed with, is to flex the spine. And in jiu-jitsu, we see many positions where flexion is very important and is necessary. So we can imagine that there's an imaginary line at the ribs and the hips, and we want that distance to decrease. And you'll see that as Coach Turner hangs, he's not just in a dead hang position, he's driving his shoulders away from his ears in scapular depression, and he's not just arching through his back. We definitely don't want this distance to increase. Instead, he's pulling his ribs to his hips with his lower body in front of his upper body, and he's really working hard to stay engaged through his entire torso.
So exercise 2 of the anterior chain progression on day 1 is a hanging knee tuck. Now, just like every other progression that we've gone over so far, there's a lot of overlap. And just like on the hanging hollow body hold versus this one, our overall focus is that distance between the ribs and the hips. Now, the main difference here is that we're going to actively be moving through repetitions. On the last one, you were attempting to hold it for 30 seconds and maintain that position isometrically. Here, we're going to actively go through as many reps as we can with a full range of motion and with good technique. So, just like with the last one, we're going to be hanging from the bar, but we're going to pull our shoulders away from our ears by way of our lats. Now, from here, this is the farthest that Coach Bryce's ribs and hips should be from each other. As he goes through the motion and lifts those knees up, he's pulling those 2 points together, right? And if you're doing that, you shouldn't just feel this in the hip flexors, but you should feel considerable activation in that rectus abdominis like Coach Bryce went over before. Now, a common mistake that people will make is that they won't tuck their pelvis and pull those together. They'll simply just lift the legs and keep the same distance between knees and hips. If this is what your hanging knee tuck looks like, it might make sense for you to regress back to the hollow body hang for maybe another month until you can get this full range of motion and pull the hips to the ribs.
The final exercise in our day one anterior chain progression is a toes to bar. Now, the toes to bar is about the biggest range of motion that we can perform in a core exercise and is increasing the lever compared to exercise number 2 of the knee tuck, where we were really just dealing with a lever from hip to knee. Now we're going an entire straight leg. Now, a note on the upper body positioning. We always want to have an active shoulder position where we have space between ear and shoulder. But it's also very common in jiu-jitsu or grappling for many fighters and athletes to have elbow and shoulder injuries. Both Coach Turner and I can relate to that as well. So it can often be challenging or impossible to have an entirely straight arm in this exercise. Having a little bit of a bend at the elbow with better biceps and triceps activation here is fine, as long as we're not trying to perform a full pull-up position. Now, our goal is just like it sounds. We want to get as many repetitions as possible where we can go from the toes being towards the ground up to literally touching the bar. Now, we want the same cue of pulling the ribs and hips together in order to activate the rectus abdominis and anterior wall core musculature. And we need to be really attentive to the distance between ribs and hips, really looking to pull them together on the way up. Especially on the way down, many people will immediately default into arching through the back. Do your best to maintain that posture on the way up and down through the